Uncle Ron stuff. This is part 6, I think, of episode 10. And it's about thoughts, thinking, the brain. The last time I've tried to, my theory anyway, explain, the whole memory based brain concept. And I got to the point where I was theorizing that uh, there's an area of the brain that sets above, sets above. I don't know why I use up down. It doesn't. That just we're programmed up down left right. We're programmed for that sort of orientation. Anyway, there's an area that sits above. I said when you see something, hear something, touch something, that it triggers a memory, and all of the memories related to that particular whatever object, I call it an object with characteristics, are fired. And there's this cascade effect of neural firing, synaptic firing, following all these memory paths. And I think setting above that, is another part of your brain that's looking at that firing, that firestorm that sweeps across the territory, the land of the surface of the brain or whatever, and interprets it in some way, and results, and it gives you a summation of some sort of summation of all that stuff. Something that means something in the here and now, and that's what is really important, because here and now is what you're dealing with. How you should respond, perhaps, to a cat or a certain situation. Okay, uh, and that sort of autotonic in a sense responses. And it would be, if you think of the evolution of the brain, the whole thing would be, how do I survive in the current moment? How do I keep warm? How do I keep food? And how do I keep from being eaten by some sort of animal or, dangerous situations? Okay, that would be the major drivers and interpretative. I think that's a new word for what happens at that next level up. Some sort of higher level analysis of that wave front that got created by the firing of all those memory synapses pathways. Okay, so the next level, okay, dealing with the here and now. You got that interpretive piece that's doing that. That provides you some, I don't know, it's not really thought, it's some sort of response uh, uh, cloud. What should you be doing or not doing? Okay. Now it poses, to me anyway, poses the question of what I call thinking, thoughts, thinking. Uh, I don't know when it started, but I think the key element for that region of the brain is questions. I'm a primitive being. I'm a Neanderthal or whatever it is, Homo sapien. Okay. And to me, one of the first things, uh, questions, would be how do I extend my reach? There's a nice juicy apple hanging on this tree, but it's just outside of my reach. I try to reach for it, and I try to reach for it, and I try to reach for it. Okay. Memory says it's edible. Uh, Hunger. I'm hungry. I don't know where that Probably that's an interpretation of the memories. Yeah, I need food. Okay, but there's this apple hanging higher up on the tree, and I can't reach it by stretching out, even with my tiptoes or whatever. I can't get it. How do I get it? I really want it. I really want that apple. Um, I need that apple. How do I get it? How do I get it? It's a question. How do I? How do I? How do I? Okay, that's somewhere at some time there had to be the formulation in some region of the brain. Questions. How do I? And you, you know, to answer to provide an answer to that, you'd be looking around like, well, um, would you look around? Yeah, I guess. I mean, I want that apple. How do I get it? How do I get it? And that the first question I think had to have been, how do I extend my reach? Uh, and that's when a stick was picked up and poked up at that apple, and the apple fell. How do I extend my reach? But the point being was that there was a question asked. I mean, it's somewhere in some region of the brain. It's like, how do I accomplish this? How do I do it? That is higher. I call it higher level thinking. It has the same goals. I want to respond to the here and now, but I can't just rely on pure memory for that. I have to go beyond pure memory in some way. And question, how do I do it? Okay, so questions, I think, are what helped form what I call higher level thinking or thinking in general. And uh, when you're young, uh, I'm not sure you do a lot of questions naturally, normally, because you're sort of spoon fed information. Okay, you're taught things. This is how you do something. You don't really have to question it yourself. It's shown to you, like, well, you can eat food with your hands, and that's what children start off with doing. But there's tools, there's spoons, and this is how you use a spoon. You're taught that. You don't necessarily, child doesn't think. I don't think he cares that he's getting food all over his hands. As he shoves it in his mouth, he's achieving the goal that's required, and that is he wants food, and there's no question involved. He just picks it up and shoves it in his mouth hole. Uh, so you're taught those sort of things. I don't think an infant thinks about, well, unless something's out of his reach, and usually just cause frustration, cry, I can't get it, I can't get it. There's no question posed, how do I do this? Anyway, you're fed this knowledge, and a lot of it's just fed in, and that's part of the problem, I think, with the educational system. They feed your knowledge, and they don't try to stimulate questions, because that's where, I think higher level, or actually thinking, comes into play. Thinking. Um, okay, question. Where did the universe come from? Okay, I get fed knowledge. There's a universe. There's stars. There's galaxies. All kinds of stuff. You look at the night sky and you see all these bright lights. Well, if you didn't know nothing from nothing, the ancients they didn't know what they were. Uh, they enjoyed their splendor. Some of them thought well, what are they? They formed a question. What is that? And they came up with various answers based on their particular uh, education, their background, their memories. What they had for memories of their life at that particular time. And that's, of course, what we all do now. We can only question what we have some knowledge about and the time that we're living in. But anyway, uh, questions of what is a star? I don't know. People don't ask that question. Maybe I don't know what is a star. The sun. The sun was a god for a long time. It gave us heat and light. I mean, I don't. I'm not even sure the early ancients knew that bright ball in the sky. Yeah, I guess that's they knew where that the heat was coming from. Light, it probably didn't even know anything about light, except it got dark at night and there was no sun present. So I think you could, make an equation that says 1 and 1 = 2, that the sun is providing us light. Uh, Moon also has light to it, but why does why does the moon have light? It's a lot of people probably don't even know the answer to that question because they've never asked that question. Uh, I don't know how you start asking questions, but I do. I think it's really important to formulation of what I call higher level thinking or thinking in general. If you don't question enough, you're not really thinking. You're only responding to the memories that you have. Uh, and thinking, I think, is really important, especially if you create somewhere in your memories that you have to think about more than just the here and now. You have to have some future vision. Well, what about then? You know, if everything's based on memories and responding to the here and now, and that's what the bulk of it is about, then there must be factored in somehow. Maybe not for everybody, but I got a dose of, well, what happens later? Looking downstream. Uh, uh, what is the impact of this or that? If I do this or that, what's going to be the consequences downstream? Consequences. Uh, Not everybody, I think, understands or has the memories of, yeah, if I do this or that, there are consequences. Or there are such trivial consequences that they don't learn that they can do behavior that is outside the boundaries of social norms or even criminal norms. But some sort of consequences which has a futures aspect to it. And it's somewhere at some time I got a big dose of, well, you should really think about whatever I do, what are the consequences of that? What could go wrong? What is the next person, if I do something in a material world, what is the next person going to have to deal with because I did this or that? I call that thinking because it has a future component to it. And I'm asking a question. What does the next person have to deal with if I did something in the here and now? Higher level thinking. Okay, so you can questions. Questions. All of our knowledge that's in those books and stored in databases and all that all came out of questions. And people, why do people want to know? Questions. Again, I think it's based on, how do I get that apple off the tree? Tools, use of tools. That was really important in the creation of man. In fact, if you think about it, this is really, really important to the evolution of humans and the brain. The eye-hand coordination and being able to manipulate and work with tools. Not only can I grab a stick and extend my reach, but I can pick up a rock and it becomes a weapon. I can scoop up water with a cup if I know how to do that and drink it. The hands are really, really important in the evolution of the brain and the storage and memories and I claim thinking because of the questions associated with it. Again, we're limited to our physical self, so you know, uh, uh, higher level thinking. I'm back on that, and the point is questioning. You have to questions. I don't. Our educational system, I don't think, puts enough emphasis on questioning. And I think you ought to question just about everything. And if you see something and you look at a tree, oh, it's beautiful. You might even climb it. But how does a tree work? I don't. How did where did that tree come from? Um, there can be 1,000 questions associated with a tree or any other object or sound that you hear. Sound is an interesting memory maker. It can be integrated, pathways get all really naughty when sound is involved because most every memory has some sound component to it. But you put in music, and now all that gets knotted into other sound characteristic memories. Questions. So I'm back on importance of questions for higher level thinking. What is higher level thinking? It can be abstractional thinking. Watching a lecture series on cosmology, that's all questions. The knowledge that came from questioning things that we didn't know anything about. And why do people want to know? That's an interesting concept. Why do you even care? Most people I don't think do. How does television work? How can I do this? We learned how to drive cars, uh, but on the other hand, do we think about the car? And airline pilots, why don't we just use a computer to drive airplanes? We certainly could, except at some point, at some time or another, there's a situation going to arise that poses questions. How am I going to get out of this particular situation? This is bad. That's not working. Whatever. I'm too slow. I'm too fast. That's where the knowledge of the pilot, he has to pose questions to himself. What assumptions am I making? How am I going to achieve a goal that says I can land this plane safely? And goals. Maybe that's something we're taught. I think a goal. What is the goal? What's the priority? What's the goal? Those are embedded in memories, but also in that set of brain material that sits above the firestorm and interprets it in some way. But the whole point of all that is to achieve some sort of goal. Maybe you're just sitting empty-headed and you got no goal. But if you're trying to do anything, there's a goal that you're trying to get to, and that poses questions. There has to be questions arising out of how do I achieve this goal? Okay. Above all of that, there's another whole area that I don't know how to define it. Mystical, maybe. I don't think it's mythical. I think it's mystical, and it's this even higher level uh, where everything below is again sort of integrated into some other quasi uh, area, which may be just feelings. Maybe that's where feelings reside. They are a weird summation of everything below it, and you have a feeling. Something. Feelings are weird. They're not really thoughts. You have a feeling, and it's in that top level, I've got memory-based, neural firings. I have some material in the brain that's watching the neural firings being stimulated and creating higher level area where thoughts come out of, questions come out of, goal achievement comes out of. But then above all that, I think there's even another area that I want to call mystical. I don't know. And it has various qualities and things to it that I don't fully understand. I know they're aware. I know they're there. Um, and that's probably the most interesting part of being a human to me, alive, aware in a limited way in the universe. And that part, the mystical, hyper level, uh, is that's where I've really been trying to get to all along. And one of the aspects that I am aware of is that even though we communicate and talk with our mouth holes and listen with our ears and we have body language and so on, there are there is some sort of higher level mystical communications going on that most people I don't think are aware of, and that's where I use the word empathetic a lot. It's where you can somehow sense or feel the feelings of others. That's an example of it. I think that sets above the memories, the next level up, which allows for goal achievement, if you will. And then the high level is some immature, underdeveloped regions of the brain that most people don't really uh, get into, or they might be slightly tangentially aware of it, but we don't get taught anything about that. We get taught very little about the questioning section and goal achievement. We don't get taught much about that. All we're doing is spoon-fed knowledge, which creates memories and gives you access to certain widespread, everybody knows it sort of information. The higher level stuff, I don't know. I would appreciate any input anybody could give me on what they think is up in that higher level, abstractional, uh, mystical area. Maybe that's where people's beliefs, like in religion, they have a really strong feeling for God, perhaps. Something like that is up there. I don't, again, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is communications. Finally, this one's running long, but I have this weird aspect, and I understand it in a sense that when I was young, I spent a lot of time listening to shortwave radio and auditory, and I would be looking for signals out of the noise of the universe, the crackles and the pops and the hisses. And I did it so much, I think it affected my memories and my brain and the next level up. And up in the mystical section, I think, of my brain, there is a receiver that's constantly sort of going. And I think there is, I don't know how it's supposed to work. I don't know how it does work, but I think I can listen in on the ether of the universe. And a good example of that is I was working on something and I was up on a ladder and I slipped and I sprained my ankle and I went over and shoved it in a sink full of ice cold water. And later that day, I saw on the news that an airplane had crashed in the Potomac River, and people had to be rescued out of the icy water. And it had occurred at the same time I had sprained my ankle and stuck it in the icy water. Now, the, you know, the coincidence, yeah, I don't, no. I think I wasn't, somehow because I was doing this work and I was mindless and had no thoughts in my head, the receiver was going and it sensed this sort of disturbance in the force. The whole thing about Star Wars and the Jedi's and the force. That's up in that top level of stuff. I don't know that you're aware of it, other than perhaps that's where feelings reside. But exploration of that is interesting. There are books about the subject. There are, self-help things. You can go to, in some places you can go and take peyote or psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and that's supposed to help you open up, I think, the top level where you question things as well as it stimulates the lower level memories, of course. But the idea is to help you open up that top level and have some sense of what's there. I'm not sure that if I'm aware of it, I'm really not sure I know how to use it in any sense. I try as I might, I can't start a fire with my mind. I can't bend a spoon with my mind. I can't seem to. I sometimes think that, yeah, that me and reality are the same and that I should be able to manipulate reality if I turn my mind inside out or something. Anyway, this has gone on way too long, but the point of all this whole series about thoughts and mind and brain and everything had to do with the highest level. Uh, the one below it is certainly important. Questions, 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 questions. And you can ask yourself a million questions, How does the sun work? What happens when the sun runs out of fuel? How long is the lifespan of the Earth going to be? Will we ever be able to colonize anything in the universe? How good? Where did all the free electrons come from? We have electrons, electricity. Electricity is a whole world in itself, and it's magical. You can't see it. Well, you can feel it if you get shocked. But enough of this. I've rambled on. It's way too long. I'm sorry. I apologize. I think maybe this will be the end of this piece having to do with thoughts. The higher level, I would appreciate any input from anybody who has thought about such stuff and maybe is aware of the top level other than feelings, which I think reside up there, but have any sort of experiences where there was some magical, mystical aspect, coincidental or other, that says there is that area, and we don't know much about it, and how can we use it? This was episode whatever, part 6, I believe. Anyway, enough for today, and I hope I've given you something to think about. That was the point. And maybe question, 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 question,